I call this a hospital visit.
Stay away from me!
We're going on an adventure.
No!
I call it a pug. Rhymes with grug. I call it a switch too. Rhymes with grug.
Overpriced games.
And I call this one rhymes with grug too. Rhymes with grug. Two.
The endless cycle continues.
I call these younglings. Rhymes with grug.
Just pull the plug.
I call it dementia. Rhymes with grug. And I call this a job application. Does not rhyme with grug. I call it dementia. Rhymes with grug. And I call this an ender pearl.
Put me down.
No. Rhymes with grug. Call it a pug. Rhymes with grug.
I like penguins.
And I call this a wheelchair.
No. Rhymes with grug!
Rhymes with grug. I call it dementia. Rhymes with grug. I call it a switch too.
Go, leave, now!
Circle? We're in it. This is...
Rhymes with grug. And I call this a job. Rhymes with grug. And I call this a job. Rhymes with grug. And I call this a job. Rhymes with grug. I call it dementia. Rhymes with grug. And I call this a job.
Wait, subs is actually a little close.
Stomping.
No. Rhymes with grug!
And I call this a job.
Take me alive, copper. The gold is mine. We'll see about that, robber.
And I call this a job. Rhymes with a grug's life. And I call this a job. Rhymes with grug. And I call this a job. Does not rhyme with grug. 6, 7. I call it dementia. Rhymes with grug. And I call this a job. Rhymes with grug. Call it a rug. Rhymes with grug. Rhymes with grug. Rhymes with grug. And I call this a job. Rhymes with grug. I call it dementia. Rhymes with grug. And I call this a job. Rhymes with. And I call this a job. Microwave again. With grug.
Why would you microwave again? Why would you? Rhymes with grug!